Hey, this is Meridith Elliott Powell, and welcome to another episode of Thrive, the show where we talk in about the strategies, the steps, everything that you need to know to turn all of this uncertainty into your competitive advantage. And I am really excited about today's guest. We've got Cynthia Hardy with us. Now, I first met Cynthia in New York, gosh, I don't know how many years ago, but I was immediately impressed. I mean, this is a powerhouse of a human being. She is the CEO of a tremendous company, has a new book on the horizon, and I want to welcome Cynthia to the show.
Thank you, Meredith. I appreciate it. I'm excited about this show. I've been looking forward to it.
And how long, you're better at this than I am. How long ago is it that we connected in New York?
Oh my gosh, it was in 2014.
Wow, a long time, but we have definitely stayed in touch.
Yes, we have, and it was in Boston.
Yes.
And it was a conference that we attended, and then we've stayed in touch. And last year, we were going to get together here in Atlanta. You were coming here from Asheville. Pandemic hit, and we're going to make it work this year sometime.
That's right. That's right. All right. So tell our guests a little bit about you, about the company that you run, and how you really came up to really build a brand around Pivot.
Yes. So I am someone who thinks very simply about people and organizations maybe in the same way. And I think about what happens when you're stuck and you need to go in a different direction. So you take that concept and you think about pivots that individuals make. That's all about what's in your head. What is it that you tell yourself is the impediment? How do you envision where you want to go? And then what do you do to put together the steps to get there? So that is kind of my own approach to life. And then I carry that over to Pivot. So working with organizations, our clients are entrepreneurs, established organizations that have been around for a bit, and also mission-based organizations, nonprofits and universities. What they all have in common is a need to say, I'm here today, I've got to meet goals, meet mission, compete better, and I need to do that largely through people and through some better creativity. And so we have 3 pivots in our business, and that's about getting unstuck, going in a different direction, right? And that is going to help you innovate, scale, grow. We've got an innovation pivot, and that is everything that you would expect around new product, service, operation, or significantly improving that. That can be tech companies or beyond. We've got a leadership pivot, and that's unlocking the best of who you are, building on that with assessments, coaching, development, teamwork. And then we have DEI pivots, which is all about understanding your place as an organization in the conversations and in the action around inclusion and equity, and helping you to evaluate what you have and map out what you want to do differently. So the company reflects my own ethos in many ways.
Well, I do think it's interesting because you've had to pivot very much in your own life. But one thing I'm curious about is, so you've been on this journey for a while. How did things change when COVID hit in terms of needs of your clients? One thing that I found is this is probably the biggest level of uncertainty many of us have ever been hit with in our lives. And so many people really got stuck.
Yes. Yes. And what we saw was uncertainty from our clients first about can we continue our operation as it is? Are we going to be a going concern? Right? There were some that have not made it along the way. We saw most of our clients pause to figure out what this meant for them and how they needed to retool, starting with, I've got people working remotely. Very different than the world they have been in. How can we help, how we could help them think about making that successful with their leaders and the individuals working remotely as employees and the managers leading remotely. That was a very big transition for many. Then you got the infrastructure around that, right? Telephony and the things that enable people to work remotely. When you move past that, now you're really talking about what's changing in terms of customer demand and need and my strategy, and am I matching up now to the market? So if you are a PPE company, you're already in that business, you're trying to make sure that you can scale up to meet demand because it's so significant. You're racing to meet demand. If you are in the restaurant business, that's a very different conversation. You're trying to stay alive. So we've seen the gamut. And for established organizations, let's say we work with a lot of folks in the insurance space. Well, that's a very stable industry. People have to have insurance. So the conversations continued about people working differently from home. It, I think, encouraged people to think more innovatively about how to deliver their products and services, and it spurred even more innovation in the industry.
Mhm.
But we've seen the gamut, and we just listen intently for where you are, the dynamic around you, what's needed to make you better, and we stage the work.
So for those listening to us right now, suppose I'm out there and I've fumbled my way through. Somehow I've made it. I'm still here as we go into 2021. But as we all know, 2021 wasn't this automatic veil got lifted off of us and everything became easy again. I mean, we've got a lot of uncertainty that we're dealing with right now. Where do we begin to get unstuck? What do you tell an entrepreneur or a business owner that does feel stuck? I mean, I think stuck a lot of times feels overwhelmed too. Okay, maybe I've managed to put my fingernails on the edge and I've got my head above water, but I'm not sure how much longer I can stay here. How do you get unstuck? How do you start to move forward?
I start with what's in your heart and what's in your head, right? So forget what maybe investors or board or the people around you are asking, demanding, expecting. I want to understand, and my team will want to understand, what do you want? As the leader of this organization, the person carrying it forward, are you in the game? Why are you overwhelmed? How much juice do you have to give to this effort, right? What is your personal passion, and are what you're doing aligned with that? Because if you have misalignment, if you're not really in the game, if you're treading water, then you've got to have a very different mindset that says either I'm in or I'm out. There's really no in between. So we work really hard to understand, are you in or are you out? And if you are in, then it's all about how we take where you are and working with you to move you in steps to where you want to be. And that means we've got to get in your head around not living in all the impediments today, but understanding clearly what you see as potential and opportunity. Then we help you solve for very practically the things that are happening. So an example, a business owner, right, completely overwhelmed. And we said, okay, the issues are around collecting payment right now. So the cash flows are off because of some of the things related to the back office. And so we just went in with them and reworked how all of that would happen, the timing, the collections, right, the interaction with clients, the expectation setting up front. And we adjusted the payment cycle. Cash flows are different. Now the world seems very, very different. Something that's very simple, but for an individual that's growing a rapid business and overwhelmed, they didn't have time to focus on that. When we got that locked, then we could say, okay, now let's focus on what it is that you're selling. And are you positioned to the market the way you need to be? And there was some misalignment. So we adjusted their products. And then we were very focused on their sales strategy. And we made some adjustments there, right? And then the next step is they actually did an acquisition. So now you're trying to talk about growing inorganically because the foundation is set the way that it needed to be. Yeah. But we needed to just tease that out and say, piece by piece, here are the issues, here's what we're going to work on. And by the way, that person 18 months later is like a different individual, just happier, right? Much happier. So that is how we just very practically go in and work with an organization.
You know, I think it's fascinating that you start with really trying to figure out if the entrepreneur or the business owner is in and out or in or out. Because I just don't think that's a question we really ask ourselves. I mean, once you really start a business, you think you have to do that business. I mean, you don't have any other choice. So you've got to stay there. But I imagine you start there because if I'm not in, you can't really help me.
It is so true. And I'm going to tell you, Meredith, we see this whether you are an entrepreneur, let's say you're a tech startup, we work with them. Let's say that you are leading a division or a function in a larger organization, it doesn't matter. Or if you're the CEO of a nonprofit, it all comes back to your sense of passion and purpose and understanding why are you doing this. And it's one thing to say, I'm hitting a speed bump at the moment. We all have those things happen in life. It's a very different thing to say, I'm really unhappy and I'm dissatisfied and I don't know why I'm doing this and it's draining all my energy. I'm out. We work really hard to understand where are you. Most often people are not there. Most often they maybe have a difference in their expectations of the culture and where they are. So we work to understand how can you change it? What impact do you have? And can you make it work, right? How do you optimize where you are? That often is a very simple conversation that we have that people overlook. The next part of it is people understanding what they bring to the table. Do you need to refresh it, right? Do you need to maybe upskill? Have you kind of reached the max of where you are based on how you've been working? Do you need to switch some stuff up? Is it that you undervalue yourself and the people around you? If that happens, you're not going to get the most out of yourself or out of your team. There can be a number of things at play, but we really work to emphasize the positive while at the same time being brutally honest about here's where we are. And based on success, as you've described it, this is the work we're going to need to do.
Yeah, I think that, well, again, the thing that I think is so important in what you're saying here, and what I really want the listeners to hear is the fact that I always say that success isn't logical. I mean, one of the things that, I value in the work that I do is I get to research companies, talk to people all the time. And it never is black and white on paper why people succeed. And it really is that inner voice and that those values and the alignment, which is something else that you talk about quite a bit. And so I want to back up. I imagine that, you worked in corporate for a long time and you are an attorney. So you've seen quite a few companies from the inside out. Did you start out on this work because you thought something was missing? Like, where did the drive and where did the ideas come from for this whole idea of pivoting and really getting these three pillars in place?
So I had the good fortune of working with a number of different companies of different sizes and working with some really, really amazing people. When I first transitioned, for instance, from a legal role into a business role, I had an amazing manager who helped me understand that it wasn't about the excellence as a solo attorney, which is the world you operate in, but it's about the influence as a leader when you've got a team, right? And that's a big transition. So at every juncture, I worked with some amazing people that I learned from and that were gracious enough to give me great feedback. I also saw, as a consumer of consulting services from large and small organizations, what I would get as output. And I knew what was good about that and I knew what was missing. So I'm the individual that has the P&L. Got to deliver the results. And I've got great ideas. Now, what do I do with them? So those identified gaps that I saw were the consulting firm leaves and I've got great ideas and now I've got to implement. How am I going to do that? Who's going to do that? How am I going to get the return on the investment and make it stick? Really, really big. The second thing is that the orientation to the customer often was on the back end, even with consulting services. So how do you move that front and center so it's part of every conversation you have at the outset and it drives your problem solving and everything you do? The next thing was I knew that in working with organizations, you had to have ownership of work when you bring in a third party to work with you. And that had to carry on after they've left. So you've got to have the ownership and you then have to have some leaders that are nimble and believe in the work to make it stick. Otherwise, it's still just an idea, right? So I was very surgical about understanding when you had engagements, what made them successful, both the work that was being done by the third party, the consultant, and also the organization and how it worked with and absorbed the work. So I had very definite ideas and I went to school on learning design thinking. agile technology principles, because I thought, okay, being human-centered, customer-centered is important. And then also the ability to do runs and sprints and trials where you're not solving everything, but you're taking pieces and you're trying some things and you try more and you try more. And you learn. And when you put the two together, you have a different approach when it comes to working with a client to solve their problems. And that's our design agility method that we use.
Yeah.
And it happened to be very timely, and it starts with the mindset and it then moves into the method.
You know, one of the things that I want to catch on to something that you said there was moving the customer from the back end of the conversation to the front end of the conversation, and make sure that it is in every conversation that you have. I've often said that when I go into boardrooms to work for companies, I can gauge the success they're going to have in the current year based on how much they talk about the customer. If it's very little, I know that they're gonna really have some challenges that year. But if the executives are really talking about, and the board are talking about customers and the customer experience, I know that that organization is on target to be successful that year.
I completely agree with you. Find when we meet with clients, when we talk with them, it's the same thing. There are a few things that we're listening for. One, a level of self-awareness around where they are. Two, an appreciation for the customer and deeply knowing the customer's needs and what the customer will pay for. And three, understanding the strengths and gaps in an organization that allow them to best match up to the customer. So we keep it very, very simple. And in that conversation, you're right, those organizations and individuals that know the customer, they continue to work to know the customer because they recognize their wants and needs, and what they pay for will change over time, right?
Yeah.
And then they're thinking about, how do I best in my organization ensure the creativity, the talent, that everybody that touches the business gets this customer, knows them intimately, gets in their head, and delivers for them. When that's embedded into the DNA of an organization, they do amazing things.
Yeah, it's incredible. I mean, it's such a small little move. And if you're an entrepreneur out there, I mean, simply just putting on your calendar every 3 months to reach out and talk to 5 or 6 customers, and not to sell a single thing, but just to listen. What it'll do for your company is really incredible. It changes your mindset, which changes your actions, which changes your results. It's really going to put you in a much more powerful position. And it's so simple, but so easily left behind. But I want to switch gears a moment, and I want to talk about your book, Crossing Meridians. Tell us a little bit about the book, where you came up with the concept, and just basically what readers can find inside.
Yes. So I'm going to start by telling you, go to Amazon, Barnes and Nobles, and you can find the book, Crossing Meridians, Engineering Disruption to Become a More Effective Leader. Go back to what I said about pivot, right? So my own ethos around getting unstuck and going in a different direction. Crossing Meridians does that at a very personal level for an individual leader, because that's where I think you start. Not the organization, but the individual leader. And it essentially recognizes that we each have all of these influences that make us who we are. We bring those into the workplace. And you've got to mine those and understand them very deeply. I call them your beginning meridians. And from there, you begin to say, here are the ones that are serving me well, some that I need to jettison, and some I've got to work on. But it also walks you through how to then envision yourself as a larger leader. And then you break down, what do you need to do to cross from your beginning meridian to the new meridians so that you are the more effective leader. And it walks you through step by step how you do that.
I love that.
Through comfort, right? And through learning through things that are different, and through crossing divides. And at the heart of that, it's also going to ensure you calibrate everything you do by developing what I call the prime meridian of leadership, which is the combination of empathy, openness, and resiliency. And I think those are often missing, but so important in leaders today. So it's a very personal journey. It walks you through how to move from one to the other. And it's something that you would want to repeat. So it teaches you to repeat those cycles of learning. And I use anecdotes and stories from, gosh, mentees that I've had, 3 dozen mentees over the years, from organizations that I've built and shaped, from colleagues, various stories and anecdotes that help you see how it is that you yourself can fit into this picture and move from where you are to where you want to be. So, leadership development, that is the underpinning of career success, very personalized, and it is the first in what will be a series of books around the Crossing Meridians mindset and method, because it's both a mindset and a method.
What I love about what you said there too is that if for anybody listening, I mean, if you're in an organization and you feel out of control, it really is. If you change as a leader, the impact you can have on the company is incredible. One of the things that I always found when I worked in corporate was whenever we had a problem, we felt like if we changed the structure, it would solve the problem. And the structure was never the problem. I mean, the structure can help. It's great. I mean, you need to think about how you structure, but it's the individual leaders. I would much rather have really strong leaders in a weak structured organization than weak leaders in a really strong with a strong organizational chart. But I love the three characteristics that you had there: empathy, openness, and resilience. And I'm curious, do those, like, if I'm thinking of myself as a leader or an entrepreneur, I'm just thinking of myself as a person, like even as I go through the day interacting with my family, do I need to think empathy first, openness second, resilience third? Do they build on each other?
I think that they're all interrelated, and that's a great question, because I haven't thought you needed to sequence them. I actually think it's the combination of them that's so important. Here's why. When you just look at empathy and openness, the two of those, at the heart of all of that, you're building trust.
Yeah.
When you build trust, people believe you. When they believe you, they will follow you. When they follow you, you then can lead more effectively, and you can do better things with your teams and delivering results. They're interrelated. Resiliency. I've seen leaders very incredibly resilient, open about the challenge, sharing that with the team, going in a very different direction. And guess what? Their team just rallies around them and they do amazing things. The leader having demonstrated resiliency was the trigger for that. So I do see them as all connected. And if it is that you're high on one of these and needing to develop in the others, do that work. It's worth it.
Yeah, I love the combination of them. I think it's really, really, really powerful. I mean, it gets you out of your own headspace first to think about others. Then it creates vulnerability by being openness, followed by strength in being resilient, and that's a wicked combination. Cynthia, it is hard to believe, but we are basically coming to the end of our show here, and you have lots more books to write, so we are definitely going to have you back on. But I have two questions left for you. One is, you need to tell everybody how to follow you, how to get a hold of you, how to find you, and again, how to buy the book, Crossing Meridians. The second is, I always like to close by asking, what's your best piece of advice for anybody out there struggling in this uncertain marketplace?
Yes. So my best piece of advice is to ask for help.
Yeah.
And I don't know anyone that you would ask who would say no. It just doesn't happen. So don't be embarrassed and don't limit yourself, because it's amazing what happens when you ask for help. Resources come to the fore, and you've got so much more momentum. So that's how I would answer that question. And then where you can find the book. So first of all, Pivot is pivotglobal.com. That's our website for the company and the pivots that we do around innovation, leadership, and inclusion, equity, and diversity. The book is Crossing Meridians, Engineering Disruption to Become a More Effective Leader. And I'm happy to say it has become an Amazon bestseller.
Oh,
and
fantastic. Congratulations.
Just put in my name, Cynthia Hardy, or Crossing Meridians in Amazon, and it's going to come up. You can go to Barnes and Nobles. And quite honestly, it's being sold worldwide with all book resellers. So you can find it anywhere. And you can reach out to me. I'd be happy to have any conversation. At Cynthia@pivotglobal.com, and my phone number is 404-980-3345. And we're happy to talk about your own pivot and engineering disruption with you as a leader within your company also.
Wow, talk about openness. I love the fact that she's not only giving you her personal email, but her personal phone number. Cynthia, you are fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us today. And I really encourage everybody to go to pivotglobal.com and check out the book Crossing Meridians, because the real power in turning uncertainty to competitive advantage begins by doing the work you need to do truly on yourself. And again, I'm Meridith Elliott Powell. Thank you for joining us for another episode of Thrive, turning uncertainty into your competitive advantage. We'll see you next week with another guest, and we're going to talk about one of my favorite subjects, accountability, and why it can be the fuel to take you and your organization to the next level. All right, we'll see you next week. Thanks.